Good day, viewers. Welcome to News Express. Nigerians' worsening insecurity crisis has entered another explosive phase after controversial Islamic cleric Sheikh Ahmad Gumi openly challenged the country's long-standing military approach against banditry and insurgency, arguing that 17 years of force-driven operation have failed to stop the bloodshed spreading across northern Nigeria. But beyond Gumi's controversial remarks lies a more deeper and emotionally dangerous national debate now dividing Nigerians across political, religious, and security lines. After nearly 2 decades of killings, kidnappings, mass adoptions, village raids, and military offensives, why does insecurity continue expanding instead of disappearing? Why are armed groups still operating boldly across forests in Zamfara, Katsina, Kaduna, Niger, Sokoto, and other northern states, despite repeated military campaigns and billions spent on security operations? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, if military force alone has not solved the crisis after 17 years, is Nigeria trapped inside a failing strategy it is too politically afraid to rethink? Speaking in Kaduna, Sheikh Gumi firmly denied allegations that he supports banditry or terrorism, insisting that his advocacy for dialogue and rehabilitation has been deliberately distorted by what he described as ethnic interest groups and sensational online campaigns. According to him, the country has relied overwhelmingly on military confrontation since the killing of Boko Haram founder Mohammed Yusuf in 2009, yet insecurity has continued spreading from one state to another. Gumi's question why the Nigerian state continues depending almost entirely on kinetic operation despite evidence that violence keeps evolving and expanding. If the kinetic approach is not working for 17 years, why don't you change the approach, he asked. That statement immediately ignited controversy because many Nigerians see any suggestion of negotiating with bandits as deeply offensive to victims who have lost loved ones, homes, businesses, and communities to years of terror attacks. And this is exactly where the debate becomes emotionally explosive. Across northern Nigeria, thousands of families have suffered devastating losses due to insecurity. Entire villages have been emptied after repeated attacks. Farmers have abandoned farmlands out of fear of adoption or deaths. School children have been kidnapped from classrooms. Travelers have been seized along highways. Security personnel have died confronting armed groups hidden inside forests stretching across several states. The emotional trauma left behind by this violence is enormous, and many Nigerians believe the only acceptable response should be overwhelming military force against those responsible. To such citizens, discussions about dialogue, rehabilitation, or amnesty sound dangerously close to rewarding violence instead of defeating it. They ask a painful question: how do you negotiate with people accused of murdering innocent citizens, abducting children, and terrorizing entire communities? Yet, despite years of military operations, the violence itself continues. That is the difficult reality Gumi is forcing Nigerians to confront publicly. According to the cleric, previous attempts in states such as Zamfara and Katsina focused mostly on paying money to armed groups without addressing the deeper causes of the crisis. He argued that true peace cannot emerge merely from temporary deals or ransom-style arrangements. Indeed, he advocated what he described as a broader rehabilitation framework involving engagement with armed groups, removing them from forest strongholds, creating surrender pathways, enrolling their children in schools, and building enough confidence that those to lay down arms will not immediately face execution or revenge. attacks after surrendering. In his view, fear and mistrust currently prevent many fighters from abandoning violence because they believe surrendering could lead directly to arrest or death. But immediately, that argument raises another deeply controversial national question. Can Nigeria truly rehabilitate armed groups responsible for mass violence without creating public outrage among victims and grieving communities? This debate is no longer simply political or strategic. It is moral, emotional, and psychological. Millions of Nigerians already feel frustrated whenever repentant insurgents appear to receive rehabilitation opportunities while ordinary struggling citizens battle unemployment, poverty, inflation, and economic hardship without government support. Critics argue that offering negotiations, amnesty, or reintegration programs risk creating the dangerous impression that violence eventually attracts attention, bargaining power, and government secessions. They fear such policies may unintentionally encourage future criminality because armed groups could begin seeing terror as a pathway to negotiation rather than punishment. Still, Gumi insists the country cannot ignore reality simply because it is uncomfortable politically. Drawing comparisons with the rehabilitation of former Boko Haram fighters, he argued that non-military approaches have already produced results in some areas where confrontation alone struggled. According to him, thousands of former insurgents eventually surrendered under rehabilitation arrangements, proving that dialogue-based strategies can sometimes reduce violence more effectively than endless military confrontation. These people told us they are ready to lay down their arms, Gumi stated. But what are their conditions? As anybody listening to them, that remark alone is likely to intensify anger among Nigerians because grieving families watching communities burn often want justice first, not negotiations. They want visible state authority restored forcefully. They want criminals punished. They want security agencies empowered to crush violent groups completely, rather than discuss conditions for surrender. The cleric also attempted to distance himself strongly from accusation that he sympathizes with criminal groups. In a separate statement issued from Kaduna, Gumi declared unequivocally that any video, written statement, or message portraying him as supporting banditry or terrorism was fake, manipulated, or deliberately distorted. He accused unnamed individuals and online actors of spreading falsehood against him while warning that legal action could follow against those circulating misleading materials. According to him, his focus has always been preventing further bloodshed through approaches addressing poverty, ignorance, corruption, and social injustice alongside security operations. He also condemned corruption directly, insisting that criminality should not be tolerated in any form, including among government officials accused of looting public resources, while ordinary citizens suffer insecurity and poverty. And that introduces another painful layer to Nigeria's insecurity crisis. What truly drives the violence devastating large sections of northern Nigeria today? Is it extremist ideology, poverty, weak governance, collapsed education systems, political manipulation, criminal profiteering, or all these factors combined together? Because unless Nigeria identifies the deeper roots of insecurity honestly, military victories alone may continue producing only temporary relief while the wider crisis survives underneath. Security operations can eliminate armed fighters physically, but the social and economic conditions allowing recruitment, radicalization, and criminal expansion often remain unresolved. That is why many analysts increasingly argue that military operations alone cannot permanently solve insecurity without parallel investment in education, governance reform, economic opportunity, institutional trust, and anti-corruption measures. At the same time, none of these changes the emotional anger many Nigerians feel whenever negotiations with armed groups are discussed publicly. That anger is real and politically explosive because citizens watching innocent people die every week naturally want decisive protection from the state, not complicated conversation about rehabilitation frameworks. They want visible justice. They want security restored. They want communities protected from fear and terror. And many believe anything appearing soft towards armed groups risks emboldening future violence rather than stopping it. This is why the debate around Gumi's remark has become so polarizing nationally. One side believes Nigeria must rethink a strategy that has failed to end insecurity after 17 years. The other side fears that negotiations with violent groups could undermine justice, weaken deterrence, and insult suffering of victims. For now, Nigeria remains trapped inside this painful dilemma. Continue relying mainly on military confrontation despite years of incomplete success, or consciously explore alternative approaches many citizens deeply distrust emotionally. That is the crossroad now confronting the country as insecurity continues spreading across vulnerable communities. And as more villages fall under fear and more families struggle under the weight of violence, one frightening reality is becoming harder for Nigerians to ignore. The country may no longer have the luxury of easy answers. That is all for now on News Express. And to you, our amazing viewers, kindly like, subscribe, and share this video. I'm Vincent Okoro. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on News Express. Thank you.